Thank you, mate. Thank you for the kind introduction. Um, I've been on mute in the background, and Nikki, it was so cool listening to all those things that you were talking about your wee journey. I don't think it's very different from anyone else who's looking at export and just goes, how on earth am I supposed to take my products into the world? And I jotted down a couple of notes. You're 100% on point with your comments on planning. um, Planning grown. It sounds like a huge task, and it was awesome for you to just point out that it doesn't have to be as complicated as people think it is. And I thought your points on finding the gaps in the knowledge are absolutely key, because this is where the institute can help out, right? There's always someone there that you can ask, who can point you in the right direction. But the thing which really struck me the most was attitude. It isn't the size of your business, it's the size of the fight in your company, and the will to get out there. I take a view that the world, it's our marketplace if we want to go out and play in it. And the other point that I loved was when you went to the trade shows. People do business with people, and when you go out there and shake hands and you start to talk to distributors about their businesses, and you find what they're passionate about, and it seems to be the same thing you're passionate about. I believe export can be the easiest piece of business when you start connecting those values. So, yeah, I'm sounding all jazzed up because it was just really cool hearing that. Um, I don't know how many of you who are listening at the moment are in export right now, but it can be quite a lonely task when you're out in the road in foreign markets, and it's not often that you get to sit down with British exporters because we're always out on the road. So Nikki, thanks for sharing. A little bit on Atom Brands and what we do. Um, I mean, someone's got to do it. Someone's got to make gin, and someone's got to make whiskey. So we put our hands up, and that's our task. That first we photo, that's me and my team, which is very small a year ago, out in Berlin, where we just launched in Germany. Yes, it's wine, it's not us, but we just come off a very successful trade show. Everyone's very happy, as you can tell, and business is booming. So we were three back then. I think we're a team of 15 now. And we kind of cut from the same cloth that Nikki is, which is let's go out and get the market. A summary on what we do, if we can go to the next slide. We make craft spirits. So essentially, our business is distilling and rectifying gin down here in England. Then we also source and bottle Scotch up in Scotland. At the heart of our business in the UK, we're actually an e-commerce business. So we're almost the Amazon version of liquor. So if you wanted to Google Master of Malt, that's our business here in Britain. And that allowed us to have a platform, almost a shop, so to speak, where we could create our own brands and and see what would work and what could be successful with a very low entry cost. If you've got your own web shop and you've got the ability to make a couple of bottles of gin and sell it on the web shop, if they sell out quick, then it's very simple. You make them again. If that keeps selling, then, oh, well, maybe we've got actually a brand here that we can play with. So we didn't start exporting until 2 years ago. And essentially, we took the products which we've been selling quite well in the UK, and the task was to take them out into the global marketplace. Next slide, please. We had two core products that we're focusing on. This is our Scotch whisky brand. As you can see, it really isn't what you'd expect from Scotch whisky. There's not anyone out there who's creating these funny zappy labels. This is really the DNA and the heart of what we do. We're a young company. Everyone in the business is very passionate about the liquid that we put into bottles, and rather than having a dusty, boring, very serious tone to our whiskies, we like to have a bit of fun. If we can roll to the next slide, please. Then the other bit of the business is gin. I don't think you can go to a small town or county in England at the moment without encountering a local craft gin. So we're at the forefront of that movement. We created bathtub gin 7 years ago, and we continue to make lots of fun, different, innovative gins. Last year, we were awarded with the International Wine and Spirits Gin Producer of the Year. So this is really, this is at the heart of everything. At our global business, 60% of it is whiskey, the rest of it is gin. And the next bit I'll talk to you about is just a little bit of a story about, looking at the products that we have, how did we take them into the global marketplace? What were the things that we kind of looked top line in our planning? What were the watch outs? And what were the things that we really focused on when we're going out into the markets to guide the conversations, to find the right customers, the right distributors, to make some decent business. So if we can roll over. Yep, that's where all of us live, planet Earth, giant marketplace, lots of cultures, drinking habits, currencies, shipping, logistics, packaging rules, compliance. It is on the outside a very confusing place to think, how do I take my brands to market? I think one of the things that new exporters or even current exporters underestimate, and that is the skill set for distributors and importers who sit on the other side of that export equation. When you start working or looking into the global marketplace and not knowing where to go, in every market in the world, there's going to be an importer who knows all the details about how to bring your product into market. So it really just becomes a task of sitting down with the plan, not being afraid of not having that information, reaching out and trying to having a think, like some critical thinking about what are the things which can help me guide my decisions to take my brands to market. If we roll over. So when I sat down a couple of years ago, the first thing that I actually looked at before even going to the global marketplace was, let's look internally. What is it with us as a business? What is it with our brands? What is it with what we do? What are the things which are the essential core elements to our business? So first and foremost, on the left, of course, we start with our products, the gins and the whiskies. That's our DNA. The other piece here, I mentioned that we won the UK Gin Producer of the Year. We're making extremely high quality products. So already, I'm setting the tone for the conversations that I want to have with our partners. We're looking for partners who know how to work with whiskey, partners who know how to work with gin, but then also partners who understand the value of quality and what quality means. Each of our brands, they have a story, and the importance of stories these days is really about building value in your proposition to market. So there's no real point in my world to go to market and say, here's something that we'll try and undercut your local products with, because there's very little value in that. One of the things I think is important to respect is not only does the business that you own or work in have to make the right margin to keep itself alive, but also your partners need to be in that position too. So the power of storytelling, the power of building a brand, those are all the things which will trade someone up from, taking a plastic supermarket labeled bottle of gin off the shelf, or then taking something which has been locally crafted by a family business for 100 years. So if you don't have your stories ready, especially in my space, then it's very hard to demand the value that you're asking for on your products. So that was an important piece to connect to the quality and then also to the liquid. I guess you can hear by my funny accent, I'm not from Britain. There's one thing that I have learnt in the last 2 years, even before that Britain itself has got an enormous cachet in export markets for quality, especially in the world of spirits. So, I've got that number there, Britain pounds. I'm really trying to show keeping the value in the heritage and the place of origin of where products come from, and being a British brand, it really counts. So these were the kind of the four things that I strung together in my mind, that if I was out there looking for people, looking for potential partners, did they get these pieces of my world? Did they understand what I was selling? Did they understand the quality? Do they have the ability to tell our stories further? And do they have a connection with UK? Did they get what Britain was about? And the other is the flip side of this, is there's a little pound sign there. And when I'm thinking about the bottom line, I feel like as an exporter, you should always be thinking about your partner's bottom line. And if you can make both of those things work, then you've got some good business to be had. Next slide, please. So taking these ideas to market, it was, well, where do I export to? I think you can look at market data and try and figure out, okay, is there a gap in the market for me here? Is there a gap in the market for me there? There's other more practical things. So being based in the UK, we've got a fantastic market on our doorstep. Europe is our largest trading partner. So instead of looking so far afield, because we could get in and out of Europe very quickly, we started in Europe. Once we started to get traction in Europe and opening up markets and finding the right distributors, we started to get through those first teething problems of export, which every export business has. You might get a shipping thing wrong, or you might miss a compliance, or just those little bits and pieces. Then we started to look to go further afield. The next step, USA, was also quite a logical next step for us, because speaking English to English, being able to change emails, be on the same page, and work with a like-minded culture who understands business negotiations in the same way we do, made that a gentle next step coming up from Europe. And then we've now gone further afield. So we're into Asia, Africa, and we're into very complicated markets, which do have very different business practices to us. So really what I'm talking about here is, it can be helpful or even useful to focus on the markets closer to home. You don't have to spend so much time on the road. You're in the same time zone, so you're not having meetings at ridiculous hours. If something's wrong, it's relatively easy to fix it with a phone call or a market visit, or to send stock away. And I'd really recommend that as a good way of moving forward before starting to branch out into other places. Next slide. This little slide I've got here, for those of you who are not watching it, what I did in part of our market research was, there's always going to be someone who's playing in your product space who has a similar value or skill set to you. And if they're out in a market and they're doing well, then there's probably a market which is a good market to consider entering. When you're a small exporter or a new exporter, opening up completely new markets where your product is fresh to category, people haven't seen it before, there are first mover advantages to making that a thing, but then there's also huge amounts of cost and difficulty. How do you teach people in this new market about what it is that you're trying to sell? We looked at distributors who were selling Japanese whiskey, which didn't used to be a thing 10 years ago. Now you find Japanese whiskey in most whiskey drinking nations now. We also looked at distributors who were very good at selling Fever-Tree back in the day, when Fever-Tree was 2 or 3 times the market price of Schweppes. Back then, Fever-Tree was the very first tonic water to say, hey, we don't have to be in a big plastic bottle and have lots of sugar. We can have fresh natural botanicals. So we looked at both of those innovative products which are in our space, and thought, well, if we find a market where Fever-Tree is doing well, then that's probably a good market to go and find a home for our gin. If we see a market where Japanese whiskey is doing well, then that's probably a place where we can talk about our high-end, free, relatively expensive, high-quality whiskeys. So just a little lesson here is see what your competitors or cross-category people are doing, where you can just borrow insights and learnings. Next one. Next slide, please. And then the slide that I'm on now is just a picture of all the markets that we've been into. So, just following those very simple rules of understanding our values and self, finding the markets where there are partners who understand what we work with, and a proven track record on similar or like products. We've been out on the road pretty much for the last 2 years. So I'm just thinking of my team and myself. Over the last 4 weeks, we've been in Shenzhen, Shanghai, Beijing, Tokyo, Taipei. We've got crew have just come back from Chicago. All of these markets have been opening up for us in a very short time, but we've kept the same discipline and focus on the values, which is taking our brands to a market where it is proven that brands similar to us are working, finding the right people who know how to work in that space according to our values that we have internally to our products, and then just trying to build a healthy, margin positive business for both businesses together. If we go to the next slide. At the moment, just as a summary, we're now in 60 markets around the world, which is just crazy. We've got 15 people in our team now, and that number that I've got on the board, which is £6 million of revenue, we'll clear 10 at the end of this year. I'd like to say that export is a complicated, hard, and difficult thing, but I really don't believe it is. I think it's something that anyone can do if they take the time out of their day, do that planning, like Nikki said. Don't let the day to day take away the thoughts of looking out there for other markets around the world. You'll find distributors and partners who'll be like-minded with your business, who will be more than willing to help grow your business because you're adding something to theirs. So yeah, that's my blabble for today. I'm not sure if that was helpful, but thank you for listening.